We're good,
We're
Mayor.
ready?
Yes, thank you so much.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Kingman City Council. This is a regular meeting on Tuesday, April 6, 2021 at 5 p.m. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Miles,
Present?
Vice Mayor Watkins,
Present.
Councilmember Mello. Here. Councilmember Nelson,
Present.
Councilmember Samley,
Here.
Councilmember Scott Staley is excused this evening. Councilmember Walker,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Thank you. This evening, our invocation will be given by Pastor John Ramos of Kingman First Southern Baptist Church. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father God, we come before you and we are thankful for this day. Thank you for all that you do for us. I pray, Lord, that you would give this council wisdom and discretion beyond their years to make decisions, to govern, to direct, to strategize, to move forward, Father God, in what they have to make tonight. I pray for the blessings upon everybody here, the men and the women
Have a
that
good
are
night.
here, Father, and just ask for a time of collaboration and moving forward in all that they do. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business is call to the public. Those wishing to address the council should have filled out request forms in advance and/or have contacted our city clerk to arrange for email comments or to telephone in. But in any action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda, with the exception of those on the consent agenda. And no comments will be allowed that advertise for a particular person or group and are limited to 3 minutes. Clerk Meredith, do we have people signed up for public comment?
Mayor Miles, I don't have anybody that registered to call in or any written comments that were submitted. We do have 2 people in the room that have signed up to talk during call to the public. The first one is Steve Robinson.
Mr. Robinson, please come forth.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Councilman. My name is Steve Robinson. I reside in Golden Valley, but I'm very active here in Kingman. I'm talking about not a very fun subject for elected officials to hear about. It's about recalls. There was a number of recalls that were processed last year. Only one of them submitted enough signatures to be on the ballot. Unfortunately, the city staff knew about the new requirement or Supreme Court ruling that came out 2 years ago that said you have to attach a copy of the application to the recall petition itself. Now, I vehemently disagree with the law. I think it was a poor ruling, but it is the law of the land. The city should have provided in their instructions, because I got the same instructions from Mojave County, that we attach the copy of the recall petition serial number application. Because the city knew about it, and I know the city people, you, Mayor, and the attorney and Mr. Foggin knew about that requirement, yet you did not inform the voters of that. What you did was defraud the voters by not letting them know that they had to attach that. And if in fact
Mr. Robinson, I would like your comments to be limited to things that are not insinuating and derogatory and casting aspersions on me or the rest of the council or the staff.
The actions of this council and the actions of the staff violated the law by not informing the people that way. And when you did that, that was basically hurting the right of the people to propose a recall. And when that happened, you took away from the people the right to vote. And so it's not aspersions, it's a fact that there was knowledge of that Supreme Court ruling. It was April of 2019 the ruling was written. And the point being is, if the people had even had to come up to defend it, which they failed to do, it would have probably been approved and people would have a chance to vote. It was wrong what happened here. It's casting aspersions. The fact is it was a violation, and the fact that it got presented in a court of law long afterwards instead of at the time that was appropriate, when they were doing the petition signature submission. So I think that that's unfortunate that the people were denied a chance to vote, because there was over 2,300 signatures submitted and over 1,500 valid signatures. And on a technicality, the citizens of this county or this city was denied a chance to vote on that. I feel that was really unfortunate. Thank you.
Mr. Foggin, is there any response allowed in a case like this?
Yes,
From the
absolutely. You were named specifically, and you certainly can. You certainly can.
Well, first of all, I would like to know if Mr. Cooper is here.
Mayor, I am online. And
Okay.
I would say, you can respond to criticisms that are directed towards yourself or staff after the call to the public is finished. So I would say if there was an additional speaker, after
Let that
that
happen.
speaker has made their presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Let's go ahead
Yes,
with the
ma'am.
next speaker.
Next, we have Siri Tabbert.
Good evening. My name's Siri Tabbert. I live in the city of Kingman. I just wanted to take a moment to publicly thank Mr. Lingenfelter and Ms. Terry for donating the 5-acre parcel between Palo Christi School and the new White Cliffs Trails. I've really been watching that for a long time, and although this thank you is brief, it's very heartfelt. I also wanted to take the opportunity to comment about my interest in having a campground in that area. My concern is that with a lot of activity and nobody there 24/7, that there's going to be a degradation of the landscape and the natural habitats for the wildlife, which will turn it into sort of a non-place. I would suggest that the city look at models of the county, Wallapai Mountain Park, Davis Camp, to see how such an enterprise could be self-sustaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taggart. So that is the end of the speakers?
I don't have anybody else signed up to speak.
Okay, well, I'll just take one moment to comment. First of all, the allegation that I knew what the law was about recall was totally false. I did not spend my time reading recall law, since I assume that those that are behind all of these recalls that have been started have become familiar with the law, knowing that ignorance of the law is no excuse. Secondly, I want to mention, so there is no defrauding of anyone, and also, to me, the charges that were in the legal documents, which included false representation to the city clerk and false circulator affidavits, are not technicalities. I know they are being framed that way, but to me it was a set of behaviors that actually were clear to the court and spoke for themselves, as well as the other people in the court that spoke to it. So I would just like to be on the record for that. And now we'll move forward. The next order of business is the consent agenda. And all matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If a discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. And so I would like to remove item C. Would anybody like to remove another item on the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to remove item I for discussion.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda from A through K with the exception of C and I. I'll make that motion. Thank you. Any second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, except for C and I. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Item C is White Cliffs Trail, the property donation approval, and this is the five-acre parcel that Ms. Taggart just spoke to, but it was critical to the White Cliffs Trail Phase 2 project, and it was not owned by the city, and Fred Lingenfelter and his sister Sandra Terry, co-trustees, donated this property for the trail project. And I just wanted to take a moment, I think on behalf of the entire council and all the citizens, to say thank you to the Lingenfelter family, because this is critical. This was a critical piece to have various trails stemming off of it. And so I just wanted to take a moment to thank that family very much. I remember when Supervisor Lingenfelter contacted me and said, we're going to be able to give that land. I was really thrilled. So I would move that we approve the White Cliffs Trail donation. And I would make that a motion.
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Ayes have it, motion carries. The next item is Fripps Ranch lighting. This item for consideration and approval of lighting upgrades in and around Fripps Ranch. And this is to address an issue with the existing lighting system, which was not constructed to appropriate NEC and UES standards, and approval of this project would allow for upgrading the existing lighting to solar to correct the deficiency. Vice Mayor.
I just really wanted to comment on this and actually get some direction maybe from Manager Foggin. I drove through the neighborhood again today, and of course I was reminded of the lights that drooped down. And I imagine those are going to be replaced, but then I saw one that must be a test or an example. It has a light with a solar thing on top. I would think that's the direction we're moving. And I think it's a great idea. I think neighborhoods, and it's unfortunate, a lot of neighborhoods in Kingman don't have lighting. And I know that's one reason why my wife and I really looked hard at Wallach Ranch and moved to Wallach Ranch, because every resident has a lamp post. And it makes it for a friendly neighborhood, and it also protects our neighborhood. So anyway, I move that we accept item I.
And I second. So we have a motion and a second to approve item I, Fripps Ranch lamp lighting. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. We have no old business, and so we'll move on to new business. And the first order of business, new business, is a public hearing and consideration of resolution number 5337, approving a minor amendment to the Kingman General Plan 2030 for certain property located at 3180 and 3186 Beverly Avenue. Travin Pennington, applicant and High Desert Land Development, LLC, property owner, have requested a minor amendment to the Kingman General Plan 2030 to change the projected land use of property located at 3180 and 3186 Beverly Avenue from intermediate density residential, 9 to 16 dwelling units per acre, to community commercial. The City of Kingman Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on February 9th, 2021. A motion by the commission to recommend approval to change the projected land use as requested was defeated by a vote of 3-4. Staff had recommended denial as the request appeared to be in conflict with several policies and objectives of the Kingman General Plan 2030. Staff recommends denial of resolution number 5337. Manager, Gary. Okay, and would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Gary Likeness, staff planner for the city, and I'm here to fill in for Rich Ruggles, our planning manager, who couldn't make it tonight, and I'm here to present those cases. So thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As the mayor mentioned, this is case GP 2100-0001. It's a request to, we have a general plan 2030 that the city uses as a guiding document to steer all future development in the community, including infrastructure, new housing, commercial, et cetera. And what's being asked tonight from the applicant, Travin Pennington, and property owner High Desert Land Development is to, the general plan map that's included in the general plan 2030 designates basically every property in the city a certain designation as far as whether it should be commercial, industrial, residential, or other. And tonight the applicant's requesting that a certain parcel or two parcels be changed from residential use designation to a commercial designation. And specifically, that's the intermediate density residential being changed to the community commercial. And that's at the 31, if you can go back, the 3180 and 3186 Beverly Avenue. And if this general plan request were approved, then this would facilitate another application that's before you tonight that's for a rezone, because rezoning property has to be in compliance with the designated, the general plan map designation. So this one has to come before that. This was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission previously at one of their meetings. And next slide. Here we jump into the general plan map as we have it and adopted, the 2030 map. And the red box with a star there is the subject property just north, on the north side of I-40 and just east of Eastern Street. That area that's sort of orange-brown is a undeveloped subdivision. There are, and we'll see other slides, but there are water and sewer services available in the area, but streets and infrastructure have not been extended into that platted subdivision. And then to the north and to the east, you can see the MDR 3-8, that's also residential designation. So everything north of I-40 and everything east of Eastern Street is designated as residential in that pocket of area there. And then you go north of Kenwood and you go west of Eastern, you start to get into the railroad tracks, regional commercials such as truck stops and fast food along Andy Devine, and capturing some of that freeway traffic. So again, the property is currently designated as intermediate density residential. Next. Just an aerial photo here. You can see the freeway more clearly. The box in red again is the subject property. The applicant owns this undeveloped subdivision here that you can see there's no roads in there, just dirt. Those are paper lots, just recorded as such. They're nothing out there right now. The property owner owns two of those lots, and that is the red box with the star. They would like to change the designation of that red box from that overall residential down to a commercial designation, which would be similar to what you'd see across the railroad tracks over by Andy Devine. As you can see in the upper right there, C3, that's the zoning over there. The current designation that's on the subject property allows for R2 zoning and R16 zoning to be applied. What's being asked is for a commercial designation, which would then allow commercial zonings to come into place, such as C1, C2, C3, other zones like that. So as we move forward on the next slide, this just shows the water and sewer, some of that infrastructure is available for that subdivision to develop. So it's possible for that, what I would call an infill subdivision, since it's in the core of the city, to begin developing. It's just a matter of time, especially with our housing boom. So there, you can see it's been pointed out that Beverly Avenue right there in the subdivision is about a 50-foot right-of-way with, again, no utilities or street improvements yet. Next. There's a site photo looking towards the southeast, and where that sign is now, I believe that is that sign up on the hill, I believe that's a lease or for sale sign, and that could be generally where the property that's in question would be located, maybe a little bit closer. And then also our picture of when we posted the property per state law. We did send out notice to property owners within 300 feet of the property. However, because the subdivision is platted and the owner owns all of the lots around the subject property, only the applicant was noticed. So no one beyond that subdivision was noticed of the public hearing. And that's per our state requirement, or our local requirement of extending only 300 feet. The site was posted with the signs, and then also the Kingman Minor, we ran an ad in there, and no comments from the public directly related to this case have been received. And in our department and agency comments, only city engineering mentioned must provide a drainage report, and that would be in conjunction with any development that might occur there. And no other comments have been provided from anyone else. Next. The analysis to jump into whether or not a property can be changed from one designation to another is outlined in our municipal code. And one of those first is to determine if it's a major general plan amendment or a minor. This one qualified as a minor per the criteria. Number two, amendments to the general plan shall be approved only if the amendment is consistent with the policies and objectives of the rest of the general plan, and the proposed amendments further the public health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Kingman. Next. So to look at, does the request comply with the general plan policies and objectives, we looked at a few relevant ones. And objective number 2 under the land use element, we looked at, does this provide aesthetically pleasing streetscapes to accommodate all modes of transportation? Commercial in a residential street is not necessarily a pleasing streetscape for a residential neighborhood. The growth element, objective number 3 down below, it's to encourage a planned mixture of land uses that provide a choice of transportation modes which reduce automobile dependency, provide for needed public open space, and creates a sense of place. And then below that is policy 3.2, which is to encourage commercial development to occur around identifiable nodes and discourage strip commercial development. So the idea of asking to have commercial designation in the middle of a platted residential subdivision goes against what we're trying to do with commercial designations, and that is to provide them near logical commercial nodes, transportation routes, et cetera. And that would, of course, those commercial designations on the land use map, again, as I mentioned earlier, would pave the way for a request to be rezoned, that property be rezoned to something like a C3 commercial or a C2 or a C1. The request appears to conflict with these policies, and the applicant has suggested, though, once you change something to a commercial designation, like I said, it paves the way for you to ask for a rezone to C3 or C2. The applicant in their application material has suggested that their intent is to provide a billboard at that location. rather than the various uses that are allowed in general commercial. But again, this is, the C3 would allow a billboard, but again, a C3 is supposed to be in commercial nodes, commercial areas, commercial streets, areas where it's logical for that, not in the middle of a subdivided residential area. So the aesthetically pleasing streetscape along I-40 and abutting Beverly Avenue would conflict as well. Not sure if there's been any evidence supported for any commercial land uses, particularly a billboard, that would be considered an amenity or something desirable or something to increase the livability of a residential subdivision where you live next door. So I have, through the P&Z hearing and this hearing, I haven't seen that yet where there's evidence that commercial uses and particularly a billboard would increase the livability of our future residents in that subdivision. With a change in the land use map in particular, not just the language of the general plan, with the change of a map, the land use map, an additional finding must be made that the request must be compatible with other land uses existing or planned in the vicinity. So existing, of course, are nothing. It's a dirt field right now, platted as a residential subdivision, zoned as a residential subdivision, and so as a planned situation in the vicinity, that is definitely to be considered those future residents of that area, along with the residents to the east that have established homes. The community commercial is intended for mostly, again, the major retail service uses that are generally, we view them and have code written to buffer those from commercial areas. And so that would speak to how commercial designations are, we look for buffers because there are inherent conflicts with residential and commercial. A commercial billboard, bullet point 2 down there, or other commercial uses could detract from the aesthetics of the area and negatively impact property values and livability of the existing and planned residential development in the area. It was mentioned in some of the discussion at the Planning and Zoning Commission level that there is some detracting elements such as billboards and semi-trucks that park overnight, across Eastern and across the railroad tracks and over by Andy Devine. These uses are allowed, and there's billboards over there. It was even at one point suggested that what's one more thing going to add? One more problem going to add to that? And I would ask that we don't look at it that way. We look at it as, what would you want next to your house? Commercial land uses, or in this case, potentially a billboard, and would the lighting of such a billboard or lighting of a commercial use or something like that, if it's an electronic message center that changes frequently, is that the kind of commercial land uses that you would want to live next to? And it was also mentioned in the hearings that people choose where they want to live, but at certain price points, you take what you can get. And so we really do need to look out for the livability of neighborhoods, not just what people can afford, because sometimes we don't have the choice to live out on 50 acres in the middle of nowhere and not be bothered. Sometimes we have to choose that home that has some undesirable effects next to it because that's what we can afford. So I would look at the commercial coming into a residential subdivision as not a best planning practice, and as a result, we've kind of provided some evidence here why it doesn't comply with our general plan. And so with that, the Planning Commission, they made a motion the motion was to approve the general plan amendment as presented, but it failed, and 4-3. And so it's coming with you with no recommendation to approve, which in the absence of a substitute motion, that would be essentially a denial in my mind, but you can view it however you want. It just was not a motion to approve. It was not passed. With that, the staff recommended to the Planning and Zoning Commission not to recommend, or recommended not to approve this. We continue to recommend staff, your planning staff continues to recommend this not to be approved. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Do any of the councilors have questions for Mr. Likeness?
I have one. Would this be in a, for billboards, should we have our own designation for zoning for a billboard? So I can understand why people might be concerned about putting a C3 into a neighborhood, but if it's for a billboard, I mean, if it passes all the tests for ADOT to put it in, and it passes everything for the city, but it's just a zoning where, yeah, you might not want a C3 in that neighborhood, but if we had a billboard zoning where, I mean, it is next to the freeway. I mean, the city of Kingman owns the next billboard down.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So I mean, I kind of feel like we're making it more difficult than it should be, and I agree, I don't like the idea of C3 in the neighborhood, but I don't see anything else going in on this property after that billboard's there either. That's just kind of what I'm thinking, that maybe our zoning ordinance needs to have a billboard ordinance in the future.
And if I could, because that did come up at the P&Z hearing level, and I think the bottom line there is that billboards are a commercial use. They have commercial elements. They're supposed to be buffered from residences. They're not appealing. They don't add to the livability of residential areas. And so the city proactively has designated areas in the community as residential or commercial or industrial. Therefore, if this is residential, this is just one of those areas we don't want commercial elements to be part of. Now, if there's a tool to have billboards elsewhere, we don't have that site-specific ability to do that at this point. But again, the reason is it's a commercial use, and that's why it's lumped in with commercial. So it would be saying, well, potentially, let's just let a lawyer's office go into that neighborhood. But we don't have a lawyer zone specific to put it anywhere we want. So to keep it simple, everything's lumped in commercial, industrial, that. So I think that's the reason. If there is a push to which there is generally a push to reduce the number of billboards nationwide, rather than see the proliferation of more. Some communities have banned them altogether. We're more friendly than that. And in fact, our new code that we're hoping to adopt, we're adopting, actually opens up more billboard opportunities in the I zones. And so we're actually being more billboard friendly. You just have to search those places that are already designated as commercial or designated as industrial to really hone in on those. Otherwise, if you're looking at residential areas, zoning has set up no commercial elements in those areas, if that helps explain that.
Mayor,
Go ahead, Councilor Mello.
she acknowledged you
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry, you'll be next.
Yeah, I agree with you, Councilman Walker. I think it would have good visibility from the highway, which would bring more potential families into our town, which is more taxes. There's no homes built around right now, and they would be aware of the billboard there, and it is a little bit different than commercial, so I am leaning towards a yes.
Councilor Samily?
My question, because it was such a close vote, can you tell me the three individuals, and I'll go both sides, the three individuals that were in favor, what were their comments in argument in favor? Not in argument, but what were their comments leaning towards being in favor?
I can't name the three individuals exactly.
That's okay. I'm more interested in their comments as to why they were leaning to approve?
Yeah, I think and the applicant is here too, so he can speak to that as well. But I think generally a feeling was honestly, the area isn't the most appealing anyway. People aren't upkeeping their properties, so what's another bad element gonna harm? And that was pretty tough, and then I think the applicant mentioned doing some research, looking for locations elsewhere, and about 6 places, and they weren't able to really find a good location that worked for them except for this location that they already owned. So they looked for other places. That was asked. And then also, I think, as you mentioned, there's not a tool currently to just put a billboard. And again, so I think that sold a lot of people, I think, that were voting for it, was that the applicant has tried, but they ultimately chose to use the property that they already owned and try to rezone it. And I think the applicant mentioned in the public hearing, he used the term B1, so sort of like a billboard zone, and he said that currently doesn't exist, and that could be something that could be used. And so that was something he brought up, and we don't currently have that tool. Certainly something that could be looked at in the future.
Mr. Likeness, I'd like to add some comments to answer part of your question, because I received some this afternoon from Councilor Staley, who's the liaison and who isn't here tonight. So she wanted to share some of the things that were mentioned. And before I read these, I just have a question, which is, as I come in on I-40, there are other housing subdivisions that I see right off of the freeway, if you will. And those already exist, right? So this one, when I look at all the little subdivided lots, they're already divided for housing. Is that correct?
If I'm thinking where you're thinking.
On this lot where they want to put this?
Yeah, they're all
It's already subdivided. I see all the lots for
Yeah.
all the houses on all these small lots near the freeway.
Right.
So it's already subdivided as a residential community.
Right, and the improvement plans are in the works, and yeah, so it'll
Right.
develop.
And we just approved the new zoning. I mean, we just have all this figured out, what's going to go where, right? But anyway, to Commissioner Staley's point, she said 3 points the commission made against the billboard, setting a detrimental precedence, residential to industrial, or I assume a commercial for this, for the purpose of a billboard. And she said the next council meeting after this meeting, I guess they had on this, was the Lamar rep saying they wanted to put billboards up Stockton Hill. Anyway, number 2 was a digital billboard. Mr. Engel admitted that this could be digital, and it would impact a larger group of citizens that then were notified of the zoning change, since only the owner really was. And the content, we can't predict what will happen to this billboard, if it could be sold to someone else, and these are points that she made. But I was thinking, I already get complaints about the billboard that is promoting marijuana and marijuana sales near a school and all these things, and that's not even somebody who lives right next to it. And there's no guarantee of what this could ultimately be sold to or leased to someone else. So those were comments that she made regarding what happened at that meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is Councilor Nelson here?
I'm here just listening right now. Thank you.
Okay. Then if there are no more questions, thank you, Mr. Likeness. And I'm going to...
Madam Mayor,
Oh, yes.
just one other thing. Should the council choose to approve the resolution or to approve the request, we have provided a resolution that would allow you to do that. So that's just in case. So if you, either direction, we've provided a resolution 5337 that would would give you the language to adopt that tonight if you go that direction. Okay.
I'd like to call to order this public hearing for consideration of Resolution 5337. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, the first person we have signed up to speak is the applicant, Travin Pennington.
Please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Travin. I live here in Kingman, work at Engel Homes. I'd like to just start, ask maybe a question that doesn't need an answer, but in looking at this project, is maybe the question is are we proposing the billboard in the wrong location? Or somewhere along the line, somebody proposed the residential in the wrong location? I don't know that the residential component gets much better by removing the billboard. It's still 65,000 plus cars a day drive right past their bedroom. So in one of the comments in support of at the planning and zoning that nobody seemed to mention was that this is a way to get this piece of property developed. It probably won't, it will sit there for some time just like it has. But, so that's just maybe some questions to propose is maybe the billboard's not the wrong component. We have residential, right, that backs up against railroad tracks and I-40. But to share a little bit of history about how we arrived here, in like 2019, we at Engel Homes, we talked about the maybe opportunity to have a billboard. There's lots of people, most of the people that buy our homes come here from other communities. Some of them driving through, lots of people moving. Sites that we considered were there in and around that off-ramp. Difficult, to say the least. The process ADOT has a plethora of rules that you need to meet, and then if you kind of can get past those rules, then you kind of trickle over to the city's rules, and the city has about a dozen rules associated with billboard signs. So for in those early discussions about billboards, we never really could there was one site on the south side of the freeway, but there's these rules about the angles of the off-ramps, and so all those sites fell through. We looked at a couple other if you were to go directly south, the opposite side of the freeway from these sites, there's quite a few parcels along I-40, south side of I-40. We looked at 3 or 4 of those. It becomes, again, the ADOT rules become in. You have to have an off-ramp. You have to have commercial zoning within a certain proximity to this property, and then you have to be able to, ADOT's requirement is either a commercial zoning or industrial zoning, but the city of Kingman, the only acceptable zoning is C3. So we went through quite a few sites, and then Gary Likeness was kind of right, kind of wrong. We purchased this site with the hope of getting a billboard. We own it now, so if we move forward with the residential, I could imagine a scenario where we probably will. But we took the risk, and it's nobody's fault but ours, but we took the risk of purchasing this property with the intent or the hope of being able to zone 2 of those lots along I-40 to commercial C3 for the purpose of a billboard. We have 0 issues putting a deed restriction on those lots, so that one of the concerns I could imagine is, well, you can when I think of C3, I think of liquor stores and all the things that are grocery stores and truck stops. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about this innate object that is constructed well before the homes ever were. So back to the rules, ADOT rules, lots of them. This site meets all of that criteria. When you get to the city rules, this site meets all of that criteria, with the exception of C3 zoning, which requires, in this instance, a general plan amendment. This site, and I'd like to state, this site currently is in the general plan at, I think, 16 units per acre, Gary? What? 9 to 16 units. So in theory, somebody could go build a 110, 120 unit apartment complex on this site with not the zoning that's in place, but the current general plan designation. So the abstract component of going and getting a billboard is this, right? The city tells you what you need to do. You need to go get a C3 site. You need to, in this instance, if there was a B1 zoning, that's what we would have gotten, right? Because I don't want liquor stores or grocery stores in this neighborhood. We want to build it to the highest quality we can and be able to sell it for the most amount of money. That requires us to kind of do our homework. The challenges to this site, obviously, it's on I-40. The eastern is a major arterial road. To the west, there's truck stops, railroad tracks.
Mr. Pennington, this is a public hearing, but
Okay.
can we have
Okay, can I ask, Gary, were you able to get the slides that I had? I sent some slides? No. With your, I'm guessing we don't have them. I'd like to go the billboard sites that the city of Kingman currently has. These are some of them. One of these ones is selling legal marijuana in Laughlin, Nevada, as you stated. I'm guessing you've got calls regarding that. If we were viewing billboards as a local economic stimulator, not getting much local stimulation out of selling marijuana in Laughlin. One of the other signs is a Lerner and Rowe. This is a law firm out of Phoenix. We have Petro encouraging people to go up the highway and purchase your fuel outside of the city limits. We have Grand Canyon West encouraging tourism at the Grand Canyon. We have and Peach Springs advertising their Walpi Lodge. Out of the signs that are in the city limits that are advertising something in Kingman, we have the Chamber marketing Kingman as a place for business, where McDonald's is marketing coffee. We have Great West Tire, we have the 4-H Club, we have Cracker Barrel. So I believe from an economic development standpoint, if this led to Engel Homes selling one additional home a month, there's not a ticket item in the city of Kingman that produces more sales tax per unit than home sales. Rough estimate, quick calculations is there's probably between $9,000 and $10,000 per house of revenue that is generated in the form of either sales tax, fees, and permits. We don't have the slideshow, but this would be an example of a billboard of something that we would, homes from the low 200s, and we market that to be able to. So I believe when you compare how the billboards are being used right now versus what we're kind of proposing, we're just some local guys tried to follow the rules. The rules are pretty clear, and then we're here to this point where we have to ask for something. So in conclusion, in light of this site and what's happening and all the moving parts and the dynamics and the not so maybe desirable location for homes, maybe this is how this site gets built in a timely manner. With this, one of the things that I would like to take a moment to talk about is this subdivision was platted years ago and it doesn't have any retention. It was before the current retention requirements for drainage retention. We are proposing that at the base of this sign that we create a retention basin that will be landscaped, and that will have perpetual landscaping and maintenance performed by Engel Homes. So I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr.
I
Pennington.
do have some questions.
Who
I
does?
know,
Oh, Counselor. go ahead.
yes, I know I'm low, but
I know, you have to speak up.
I need a
look
flag
up
to
for the
wave.
Zoom. I look up for the Zoom, Counselor.
I do have some questions for Mr. Pennington. Is there any proposed lighting? Can you say, can you talk to that point?
Yeah, at this point, we have no intentions of doing a digital display sign. The upcharge is this sign is roughly going to be about $100,000 to construct. To throw the digital reader adds about $150,000 per side, and so I can commit to it. We're not going to do that when it comes to light. So it would be just like a static, typical billboard that you see here in town. Nothing fancy, no technology, and If there was lighting, it would be up lighting, not down lighting.
Okay, and I have another question. You talked about deed restrictions, which I feel that would be an obstacle we could overcome if it went to the zoning that it needed to. So you're not opposed to a deed restriction if it came to that?
I will make a commitment today that if this is successful without any prompting, I will bring it back in a future meeting to show that deed restriction was put in place and was included in the public report.
And how would that deed restriction look?
You're asking for the wording, or it would restrict?
Generally.
I mean, I think what we're proposing is that this site, we're proposing it be used for a billboard. So I would restrict the use of that site to anything beyond the use of a billboard.
Okay, and my final question, speaking to improving livability, there's no better way than to develop the property. You're improving livability right there by developing an undeveloped piece of land that has sat there for years. How many lots are platted?
In this subdivision, there were originally 42 lots. We're proposing to take 2 of those and rezone them, because there's a requirement to have C3 zoning, and then when you dive a little deeper into the zoning code, there's a minimum size for C3 parcel, and I believe it's a 1/4 acre, so that's kind of how we arrived at, we just took 2 lots and figured that we would center the sign up, construct the sign on the center of those.
And the future construction, would that be single-family residence, multifamily? Have you gone that far?
It's currently zoned about 22 of the lots in that subdivision are zoned for multifamily or duplexes. We could also build single families, but right now our intention is to build single family homes. So I have 40 single family homes.
And do you have a range of what that would? I asked that because, I mean, you alluded to
price.
Sales tax. Yeah, you alluded to sales tax.
I'm going to say the low 200s, but I mean, that's like a moving target depending on what prices increases. Maybe this is just a way that this site gets developed, right?
Right.
I mean, this has 800 feet of frontage on Eastern that is undeveloped, that dramatically needs to be developed, and I think the city is in the process of creating a capital improvement project to develop that or to improve that, and this is just an added component of that.
Right. And my final comment is, by improving this property, I can see it improving the comparables in the neighborhood surrounding. So I don't see the detriment. I'm leaning in favor of this project as well.
I have a question.
Okay.
Housing is so hot right now throughout this country. I really am not concerned that much about affordable housing selling, but I do have concerns about people living so close to the freeway. And so has there been any discussion about sound barriers? Has there been any discussion about green spaces for all of these affordable homes? But especially, I know if you go into Vegas and other areas, when people are going to live right up against the freeway, there are walls and things that protect them from sound. And I just wonder if there's been any discussion on quality of life issues for the community.
Yeah, we've purchased, to your point, we've also, in the process of developing some Rancho Santa Fe phases that back right up against the on and off ramps of that. There's about, to be exact, like 150 plus or minus lots. So I can't say that I know a bunch about how to build soundproofing walls, but we're in the process of learning that and getting that bit out. And so I believe we would be absolutely take that and carry it over to this. But I have a landscaping fetish or a tree fetish, so I think some of this, by putting some trees in the backyard of each one of these houses that back against the freeway on this 12,000 square foot site that I'm proposing that we turn to C3, we're going to construct a billboard sign in the middle of that. There'll be a retention basin in a portion of that, and then we are going to landscape that. And when I say landscaping, I mean trees because I have a tree fetish. And so I think that's sometimes how you can make the world just a not so beautiful place, just a little bit more beautiful, is things like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have Ryan Swap registered to speak on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Do I have a time limit?
I haven't set one, but, to be fair,
I promise not to be long.
Limit it to 3 minutes. I let that other one go too long. I must get more strict on my time limits.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
generally, the applicant has the time to answer questions, not subject to the 3 minutes. Public comment is generally
Oh,
driven
thank you.
to people who show up to talk about it.
Lifelong learning. Please go ahead, 3
Thank
minutes.
you.
I promise not to be long, really. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My interest in this potential rezone is that my wife and I own 2 properties in the adjacent neighborhood, rental properties, and would obviously impact those, including one on Central Avenue, which is the street adjacent to this property. And, you know, if this were happening in any of our backyards, this would not be okay. It just wouldn't be okay. And so I took my lunch hour today to walk down Central and knock on doors and see what the people living next to this thought. I mean, it's no surprise that they were unhappy about learning about this. This was the first time that they had learned about it. There was no, apparently there was no need to provide notice to these people. And so they were learning about this. They were disheartened to learn that there would potentially be a billboard back there. The city has a general plan. It's been very thoughtful. The Planning and Zoning Committee has spent a lot of time and effort on that. The Planning and Zoning Committee has looked very hard at this, and they've made a recommendation. City staff has made a recommendation. And it surprises me the tone of the council, so eager to please the developers who are not suffering. What is the public good that comes from this? I'm not convinced that sales tax is the greater public good. After all, every new house creates additional burden for us. We have less parks per capita. We have less dollars for road maintenance per capita. I don't understand why the council, I don't understand why we look for exemptions. I mean, these exemptions are why my neighborhood doesn't have curbs and gutters. Why are we even talking about that at this point in time? Why are developers asking for exemptions on curbs and gutters within the city limits? It makes no sense to me. This is why we have tract housing to the south of me for acres and acres with no park, no plan for a park. Please, please, you have a responsibility to the public to do your job for responsible development and to make this city beautiful. Please, please have your name on a plaque in the park, and please do not let your legacy be a billboard for Angle Homes in a residentially zoned area. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Swap.
Next, we have Siri Tabbert.
Hello. What I'm going to say is going to sound a little bit blunt, but it is really in light of the fact that the people who do this for a living have said they don't want to do this. They don't want to see the exemption. Okay? Here's my message posting for Kingman. Welcome to Kingman. Beautiful modern city. No billboards. What he said is going to be on his billboard. I I don't understand that as being much elevated over what's already here. No billboards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taggart. Anyone else? Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? I'll end the public hearing. Is there any further discussion from the council? Then I would entertain a motion regarding Resolution 5337.
I will make a motion to approve Resolution 5337.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, and I would like a roll call vote.
Mayor Miles,
I'm going to agree with the staff and the commission and vote no.
Vice Mayor Watkins,
Yes.
Councilmember Mello,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
No.
Councilmember Samily,
Yes.
Councilmember Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next order of business, which is a public hearing for rezoning certain property from R2 residential multiple family low density to C3 commercial service business at 3180 and 3186 Beverly Avenue. Traven Pennington, applicant and High Desert Land Development LLC property owner, have requested a rezoning from R2 residential multiple family low density to C3 commercial service business. The concurrent minor general plan amendment under resolution number 5337, which was just approved, will bring the projected land use and density standards of the adopted City of Kingman General Plan 2030 into conformance with the requested zoning of the property. If approved, the owner intends to apply for a conditional use permit for a billboard on the property, which may be allowed by a CUP in the C3 zoning district when located within the defined sign corridor. The City of Kingman Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on February 9th, 2021, and recommended the denial of the rezoning by a vote of 6-1. The recommendation for denial was made because the associated minor general plan amendment was not recommended for approval. All rezonings are required to be in conformance with the adopted general plan in accordance with ARS 9462.01F. Staff recommends denying the zoning request. Mr. Likeness.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. This is the companion case to the one you previously heard, the general plan amendment, which was the council approved, Resolution 5337. What that does is fundamentally change the commission report and staff report for this case, as this case is for the rezone. It was based on the request not being satisfied by the general plan. But now that that resolution has passed, there's a new light on this, and we could go through the entire staff report, which mimics basically everything we've talked about. I will briefly go through it just to refamiliarize yourself. Same applicant, same location. R2 is the current zoning on these lots. The desired zoning is C3. That's the general plan amendment. That starred area would now have a different color. It would be, I'm sorry, I think it would be the darker red. And so you're familiar with the site of the property. Keep going. The zoning would, the R2 surrounding zoning, R16 zoning, again, everything north of I-40, east of the railroad, and eastern is residentially zoned. These two lots would be rezoned to C3 general commercial, which would be similar to those to the west of the railroad tracks. As you can see, the truck stop and fast food areas. South of the freeway is also zoned R16. Next map, please. Again, we mentioned how utilities are available in this area, and the plans are, as I understand, in development for the improvements to the subdivision. Next. Site photos, again, that location of that small sign there on the hillside is about the location of the subject lots.
Gary, I don't mean to interrupt you, but really prefer if the council has questions with the slides that we not re-go over them unless the council finds that it's necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it is necessary at this point,
Agree.
unless there are questions.
Next slide. Notice was sent, no department agencies, comments. Next. The analysis, we consider this a spot zone rather than you normally would zone something contiguous to the next zone and keep a district going, not spot zoning. So this is not something that's considered best planning practices. The C3 should be along arterial streets, not local streets, which this one would be. Next slide. Suitability. C3 allows a variety of uses, including a billboard. Having a billboard would detract from the aesthetics of the area, could impact property values and livability of the existing and future planned residential area that it's in. The billboard could be as large as 672 square feet, 14 by 48, which essentially would be looking at the front of a good size front of a house located.
Mr. Lightness, I really don't think there's any reason to convince regarding the size of the, seriously, unless there are questions, because the other one was already approved. Some of those comments are relevant, obviously, but I think we need to move it forward more quickly.
Okay, the rezoning has different criteria. So I'll let you know that I presented a staff report.
If this is not rezoned, can they move forward with the billboard?
This is separate from the resolution to change the general plan.
Okay.
The rezone has different criteria to approve a rezone. So
Okay.
that's why I was going over it. But
Okay.
with that being said, and the direction, I've provided you a staff report, the commission report. We recommended denial. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 6-1 to recommend denial, but that was based on it not meeting the general plan. So at this point, it's open. The only thing I would direct give counsel to the council is that at this point, what if you're inclined to approve the rezone request, it has to be a motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance that will be heard at the next hearing. And that's just to help you as you figure out a motion, because we don't have an ordinance for that tonight. And that's the standard protocol for that. So your motion would just be to direct
relevant.
us.
Thank you.
And I'm here for any questions.
Are there any questions?
No.
From Mr. Lightness? Okay, this is a public hearing. So I'm going to call this public hearing to order and ask if there are anyone that would like to speak on rezoning certain property from R2 residential multiple family low density to C3 commercial service business at 3180 and 3186 Beverly Avenue.
The applicant, Travin Pennington, is signed up to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Yes, Ryan Swab.
I've already said my piece here. I respect your vote. Also, I would ask you to consider when a commission looks at an issue, and these commission seats are hard to fill. When when you decide to go your own way and go against the commission's findings, I mean, it really doesn't help morale there. There's a reason why people don't want to sit on these commission seats. And so I would ask that you consider that. The last thing I would ask you to consider, I know in my time serving on the hospital board recently, there were situations that pertained to me or people that I was practicing closely with, in which I would recuse myself from votes. And I would ask you, if you are doing business with Engel Homes, I'm not suggesting that there's any impropriety here, but I think it's best for the community, for you personally, and also for Engel Homes, if you would consider that respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swab. Any other comments?
I don't have anybody else registered.
We'll close the public hearing. Is there any further council discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I know it's a difficult subject and no one wants billboards, it seems like, but there's already existing billboards in the area. In fact, our city, 8 to 9 streets to the east of that, has a big billboard right at the end of a residential neighborhood between Yuma and Apache Streets. I'm sure that billboard was put there and then the homes infilled around it. I think Councilmember Mello brought up an important fact that, these people, this billboard will be built before the homes are built. And so those people will be aware that that billboard is there. It's not going to be a surprise to them. There's those homes, and Mayor, you brought up an important point. I mean, it is a concern if a truck or something, or car were to go errant off the highway. That could happen where the City of Kingman billboard is. That's the residential neighborhood right there, right up against the freeway. Unfortunately, we have that in a number of areas in the city. I would hope that it would never happen. But on the same token too, I think a billboard like this can bring also business to the City of Kingman. And that's what we're trying to attract, is business to the City of Kingman. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other comments? Please go ahead, Counselor.
I just want to say that I certainly do appreciate our commission boards and our staff when they do the homework. It definitely helps us, but I wouldn't be doing my job, all of us wouldn't, if we didn't do our own homework and vote what we feel is best for the city.
Any other comments? I will share a few of my thoughts, which is the history of this city is punctuated by concessions to developers. And they result in things that people are now coming forth and making a case about, which include streets with no curbs, streets with no paving, billboards in residential areas. And I really think that while we do want to attract business, and we do a lot of good things to attract business, and obviously are attracting businesses, and even with the infrastructure development, it's going to attract many, and the developers that are represented here are going to have wonderful opportunities there, and including to put billboards in appropriate places. I guess the emphasis that I have seen the council take over the past years has been to try to get emphasis on the quality of life for our citizens and on the partnership with developers to provide amenities for citizens so that people don't move here just because the housing is something they can afford, but it's a place they really want to be. The neighborhood has a park. The neighborhood has quality of life issues. Now, I understand this is a low-income type of area right along the freeway. But even so, when you're talking $200,000 homes, if that's really the case, that's somebody's life, devoted to buying that home. And so the fact that it's been done before doesn't compel me, because we've worked very hard to create standards, and that's why we've done new zoning, new master plans, so many things for this city to try to get some coherency to how we plan and how we build this city. So that's my only comment. I feel strongly that the fact that it has been done before is not a good reason to do it again. And I don't think we're going to have a problem selling any home in Kingman, really, if the economy and the housing market stays the way it is. So that's all I have to say. And at this point, I would entertain a motion regarding item 4B, which is rezoning certain property from R2 residential multiple family, low density, to C3 commercial service business at 3180 and 3186 Beverly Avenue, recognizing that the motion must call for the staff to return at a subsequent meeting with a prepared ordinance.
I will make a motion to direct staff to revisit this, to bring it back to us with the proper zoning.
I'll second that.
You have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye, or no, all in favor, please do a roll call vote.
Can I clarify that that motion is directing staff to draft an ordinance for approval?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Miles?
No.
Vice Mayor Watkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Mello?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Samily?
Yes.
Councilmember Walker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to department reports, and our first department report is the Fire Station 5 presentation.
Mayor, thank
yeah.
you.
Yes, man, I was going to call you,
I
Manager
know, I
Fine.
just, with Councilor Staley not here, she is the one that had requested this item be addressed, and it would seem appropriate to push this to a meeting when she's here so that she's able to ask any questions. And so it would just seem appropriate to table this one and bring it back at another time.
I totally agree. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to talk to you before the meeting on that.
That's
so.
okay. No, I was hoping that would be the case. Okay, and our second report then would be the Police and Fire Pension Liability Management. Manager Foggin.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe in our talks about dealing with PSPRS and the challenges that have been part of trying to pay that down, we had mentioned that there was some light at the end of the tunnel that might not be a train. So we have a presentation for you that I think shows a way of us being able to tackle the PSPRS challenge. And so we've invited our financial advisor to come and help us explain that a little bit better to you. So actually, do we need to start with Tina or do we start with Mark? Okay, Mark Reeder. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tina.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tonight we have with us Mark Reeder and Omar Dasset-Ganti, who will be presenting this evening to you.
Ms. Moline, you also have Claude Lockhart on the Zoom, as well as Tim Stratton.
It's good to know we're being babysat. Actually, it's Mark's being babysat. No.
There we go.
Thank you, Tina. Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Mark Reeder with Stiefel Nicholas, and I've had the privilege of working with your city on your public infrastructure financings over the past several years. We've enjoyed working with your city, and it's nice to be back in front of you. As a practitioner around the state, we work with the cities and towns and counties around the state and the state agencies on their public bond issues. And the PSPRS Tier 1 and Tier 2 unfunded pension liabilities has become more and more of an issue, if you will, in recent years from investors who invest in our city's bonds and from the credit rating agencies. So we've been able to really kind of manage our way through that whole process for our cities and towns around the state. So as you know, it's a high-profile issue, and it's been a real challenge for you all. And I know that you're all in budget sessions as it relates to this item. It is your largest liability on your balance sheet. Your city's done a very good job of not really having a lot of debt, but I think, as you know, your Tier 1, Tier 2 is a constitutionally protected, unfunded liability that we have to deal with. So we're going to walk you through a solution for consideration that we've been working with our cities and towns and counties around the state. It kind of started about a year ago with the city of Flagstaff, which is one of our clients, and the city was $121 million unfunded. They were only about 33% funded, so they were also looking for a solution to this, and they weren't necessarily interested in raising taxes to address it. So we were able to do a refinancing, essentially, which is what we're going to walk you through here this evening, refinancing of an unfunded liability accruing at about 7.3%, and then issuing a city type of revenue bond that myself and my colleague Omar are going to walk you through at a much lower interest rate than that. So I just wanted to kind of give that as a backdrop. I'm going to tag team with my colleague Omar, who's behind me, and Omar flew out to Arizona from Chicago, and when Flagstaff called last year, we didn't really do these pension financings where my colleague Omar has been working on them for about the last 20 years. So you'll find him very knowledgeable, and I'm gonna go ahead and have him come up after a few slides. Okay, this isn't turning. Do I need to? Oh. In the window, okay. There we go. Can you all see that? Okay, great. So I wanted to make you feel a little better. I think you may know some of this. This is a pie chart of all the Tier 1, Tier 2 unfunded liability we have in our state. Okay, we're about $13 billion with a B unfunded. And you can see our cities and towns are about $7.4 billion. They're the largest. The state's about $2.6 billion. That's primarily DPS on their Tier 1, Tier 2 programs. Our counties are about $1.3 billion. And then you can see our fire districts out there are about $400 million. So a lot of our jurisdictions around the state are managing their way through their unfunded liability. We just kind of wanted to give you kind of a global perspective in Arizona. There it goes. So a lot of numbers here, and we're going to graph this for you to make it a little easier for you to follow. Down in where the red box is there, if you can see that, you're about $33.3 million unfunded at the moment, roughly. Okay, so pretty big liability. And I'm going to take you to the next page here. And this is in the box down here, if you can see my cursor. Can you all see my cursor down here a little bit in there? So if I go to police and I go to fire, you can see the AAL is the present value of the liabilities. So these actuaries come out with these very complicated mathematical calculations based on how long people live and all the expenses associated with paying our retirees and their spouses over time. So they run through all this math, and what they're saying here in your police, and these are separate funds, right? These are not like ASRS, Arizona State Retirement System, which is a pooled fund. These are funds that stand on their own, both police and fire. They have their own assets and they have their own liabilities, and we don't share that with anybody else or any other funds, okay? So just to kind of put this into perspective for you, and I'm going to go quicker here, police has about almost 34 million of present value liabilities to pay out, according to the actuaries. And in that account right now, there's about 19.3 million of assets that is being invested right now by PSPRS. So you can see the unfunded portion of police is about 14.6 million. And again, accruing at 7.3% to PSPRS, and the funding ratio is about 57%. Now, all of our goal is to be at 100%. You're 57, not bad. State average is 47%. Flagstaff, when we fixed their situation, they were in the mid-30s. Okay, so you're above the state average, but you're still fairly low. And then on fire, you can see the net difference there between the assets and the liabilities is almost $15 million. Okay, so just wanted to give you that brief overview, and I know you're aware of some of this information. Okay. So this page 4 is a fairly busy graph, but I'm going to take you to the right-hand column that says total UAL amortization. That's your unfunded with PSPRS liability. And the city has entered into an amortization agreement to repay, and this is police only, I meant to say, to pay this back over time. And you can see you're about $1.3 million now. I'm going to round if you don't mind. And you can see, according to PSPRS, your payments are going to double, almost double to about $2.4 million per year. And, it makes us all nervous when we see payments doubling, of course. And, again, that's all based on the actuarial calculations, okay? So I'm going to go to fire. Fire on the right-hand side there is about $1.3 million going to about 2.4, so very similar. That's going to double. And then on page 6, all we did there was we combined your police and fire, Tier 1, Tier 2 amortization payments out of your budget. If you don't pursue this option we're going to share with you in a moment, that you will continue to pay the numbers in that column there that says in red 2.5 going to almost $5 million. Okay? So this slide here, what do we do to address this unfunded liability that makes us a little bit nervous? And really, we have kind of 3 things on here. Our cities and towns can continue to kind of just pay it, and you would pay what we just shared with you. And it would likely probably grow over time, again, depending upon the return of PSPRS. Their current return, I think, as you're aware, is 7.3%. That is their estimated annual actuarial return. Item number 2 would be you could amend, and I know you're in budget coming up 21-22, and you're required, as you know, to adopt a PSPRS policy in terms of how your city's going to address this liability. Legislature required that several years ago, and so, if you didn't do the refinancing we're going to share with you in a moment, you could certainly amend the policy. Perhaps if your budget would allow you, you could throw more money at the unfunded component. And that's what we're seeing around the state. And we know that your general fund budget has significant demands on it. You have infrastructure needs, you have, running your city and all that. We're finding that most of our cities around the state don't want to increase taxes to address the situation, obviously. Now, Prescott, as you may have heard at the league conferences and with staff, Prescott is one city that had a vote to increase their local sales tax by 1% to address their, I think they were in the 20s, high 20s. Their unfunded liability, and it passed. They were a charter city, so they had to have a voter-approved initiative that passed, and they're levying that tax as we speak, and I think it generates $6 or $8 million a year. It's pretty significant, and when they get to 90% funded or 95% funded, that tax sunsets, goes away. That's how Prescott dealt with it. Flagstaff tried to be as creative as they could. They implemented a use tax. And I meant to ask Tina if you all have a use tax. You have a use tax here. Flagstaff did not have a use tax, so they projected that was going to generate about $800,000 to $1 million a year. So that was kind of their attempt to do something locally to generate revenues, throw at the issue, and that still wasn't enough for them, and the liability continued to grow. But obviously that is an option for our cities and our towns and our counties around the state if that was something that was the leadership wanted to pursue. And then the third option here is this refinancing item that we talked about. And maybe one of the only good things about COVID, maybe besides getting some federal money for our cities, that's beefed up our balance sheets a little bit, and is that we have recently been in a historical low interest rate environment, as you all know. The mortgage market is low, the municipal bond market's low, and so as a result of COVID, when we started working with Flagstaff, they saw this as an opportunistic opportunity where we went out and sold some bonds for them, and we got like 2.6%, funds for them. So we swapped essentially 7.3% money for 2.6% money, and they actually had a little bit of budget capacity, and they actually paid off their PSPRS amortization about 8 years early. So Flagstaff set the stage, and ever since then we've been kind of on a whirlwind. We've done 10 transactions totaling $1.1 billion over the last really 9 months. And of course, we've been talking to, your city and staff about this. So with that, what I wanted to do now is turn the presentation over to my colleague, Omar, if you don't mind. Omar, come on up. Omar's from Chicago, and he'll make you feel really good about what their pension liability is out there. And I'm sure you've heard about that. And then this is a interest rate chart of the 10-year U.S. Treasury. You can see on the right-hand side, it's, we're a little worried because they're starting to inch up on us, but we don't think it's the end of the world relative to the interest rate market, and we're still, all in all, in pretty good times, all in all. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Omar, and he's going to walk you through the rest of the slides. Omar, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and members of the council. I very much appreciate the chance to be here in Kingman. It's a welcome opportunity to be able to be here in person versus on the other end of a Zoom, and have a conversation as important as this in person. As Mark had shared, I've spent the last 20 years of my career thinking about how to manage pension liabilities, how to manage them more efficiently. I recognize on an evening night, it's probably not the top of mind of things that you want to have to deal with, yet I find it to be fundamentally central to the ability of the city to be able to provide services efficiently. And with that, as Mark and I and our colleagues have worked over the past months, we've found solutions that have really allowed cities and counties to more efficiently manage this liability and take control of it. Now, one of the things, if you look on page 9 here, there's a lot of charts and so forth. The main thing that I would share in looking at this is the fact that you're taking a liability that is, as Mark said, constitutionally mandated by the state of Arizona. The case law supports that. There's no, it's not a soft liability when it's constitutionally mandated by the state. And it's currently a debt, effectively, that is occurring at 7.3%. You're refinancing it. In the current market, we estimate it's about 2.77% when we do these. We are very aggressive in marketing to investors nationally, in fact, even some international interest. And having now done 10 of these in the past months, I will tell you I have investors hungry for this type of debt. I'll give you an example of an insurer in Wisconsin, an American family. The head trader has a vacation home in Arizona. He loves intermediate term taxable debt, and he loves Arizona. And he wants to buy these, and he keeps tightening up the pricing, which even despite the fact that treasuries have increased a bit over the past months, that we've all seen that in the market, we still see very attractive rates. What does that mean for Kingman, excuse me, I'm so sorry. What it means is anticipated present value savings of about $20 million, 60% which if you consider relative to like a traditional municipal bond refunding where the threshold is about 3%, this blows the doors off of that. The other thing that I'm personally really excited about this, and we've had fantastic rating feedback on, is the fact that this has a contingency reserve fund, meaning that you're borrowing several $1 million. In this case, we estimate about 4.3. Obviously, we'll work with your finance team if you decide to move forward to refine that. But that money would be held at the city in a cash or cash-like product, principal protected, so no equities, nothing that's going to fluctuate in value. In the event that there is a bad year in the market for returns and or actuarial changes from PSPRS by which you're presented with higher payments. And so those two things in the contingency reserve fund, you know, when you think of the long term of, gee, you know, before 2038, is Kingman going to be able to, you know, and PSPRS, are you going to out-earn the 2.77% borrowing rate? I'd like to think history points to a pretty likely case for that. But you have to be able to get to the long term. You have to get through the short term to get to the long term, and the contingency reserve fund addresses that risk. And so it's a structure that rating agencies have really liked. It's something that I think provides you a good public policy tool. It's something that we've had great feedback from rating agencies, from investors, and other market participants. I'd like to just pause there. We'll talk about risks in just a moment, but I just wanted to pause there. I know there's a lot of information on this page. I'd certainly welcome any questions or comments. Okay. I entirely understand. I will, page 10. No, I mean, it really is.
I'm sorry, I wasn't on the mic. I said, once you caught mentioned the net present value savings of 20 million, that caught our attention, I'm sure.
And certainly it is a unique opportunity in the market with rates as low as they are, where you're able to generate that type of anticipated savings. And we show what that means in terms of your payments relative to your budgeted, the current PSPRS UAL payments for tier 1 and 2. Column A is the payments that you're currently scheduled to make were you to take no action tonight. Column B is what the debt service that we propose to replace those payments with. You know, once the bond issue is closed, the payments will be sent, the UAL amount would be sent to PSPRS, and you would pay the new debt service line, column B. Now, what's interesting there is, one, you have 4.3 million that will go directly to Kingman and be available for that sort of volatility in the market in the event that you have investment return risk, in the event, frankly, that PSPRS has a new mortality table or other actuarial assumptions, which I would tell you, having done this for 20 years and having worked from coast to coast, I think that's actually a bigger risk than investment return risk, frankly, but they're both risks to be taken seriously. But as you can see, in the early years, you know, very modest difference in your payment amount. Over time, you know, by the time you get to 2028, you're $1.1 million lower in terms of what you're paying relative to this liability that already exists. By the time you get to 2037, your payment is 2.1 million lower, and you've flattened it out, so you don't have that. You know, when I talk with council members and members of finance community, people are always like, well, gee, I keep putting more money in, and I feel like the payments keep going up, and you know, this allows you to control that, both in terms of the risks that we'll talk about in a moment, as well as, frankly, the acceleration of the growth, which Mark had mentioned. I come from Chicago. I lead our Chicago and Boston and New York offices. And in Chicago, we have these problems weren't dealt with early enough. And when you get to that point, it gets to the point where you can't afford to provide basic services, and you have to keep raising taxes, none of which, you know, are desirable public policy outcomes. So that's just a comparison. We talked a little bit about risks, and I want to be very direct about this. The biggest risk of moving forward with this is the investment return risk. If you believe that PSPRS over the next 20 years is going to earn less than 2.77%, which has not been the case over any prolonged period of historical data since PSPRS was established in 1962 or 8. I know it's one of those two. I have to forgive my history. That hasn't occurred in history, but there's nothing to say it couldn't. But that is the primary risk. If PSPRS were to earn less than 277 over the next 20 years on average, you'd be worse off for having done this. If you earn 277 exactly, you're neither better nor worse off. You should be indifferent, financially speaking. And obviously anything above that 2.77% is benefit to Kingman. And the anticipation is the 7.3%, which is a very looking nationally, I would tell you that's a very reasonable and on-market expectation, as well as in conversations we've had with PSPRS. But obviously that's something for you to consider. Actuarial risk. I usually, I know it's been a long night, so I'll spare you my actuary jokes, but I will share. I consider this risk to be just as important as market risk in the sense that Americans are living longer, and that's great news. We're all better for that. It's not great news for pension math, and every time a mortality table is revised, adding on a half a year of life expectancy does awful things to pension math, as you might expect. And so that to me is something that I think is one of the reasons I'm really a big proponent of the Contingency Reserve Fund, so that you have that plan for it and you have that in your pocket, at least to help manage that kind of risk as it occurs over time. There's obviously a variety of other risks to consider in terms of statutory changes or constitutional provisions. I would say those are probably a bit more distant, but I would certainly pause here to sort of ask if there are questions or comments along the lines of risk and considerations.
Questions? In terms of the risk associated with changes, the state changes or any legislative changes, I've spoken with Manager Foggin about this, and that seems to be something that he feels is going to be relatively stable, that they're not going to make, because of course I've talked with some mayors who say maybe the state will just do something wonderful and help us all. I don't think that's going to happen either. But barring that, I just wanted to make sure I understand if the investment return on the state funds are less than 2.7, would that increase the obligation that we have, and hence we would not have borrowed enough money?
That's right. If it were less than 2.77%, you'd be worse off because you would have been borrowing money and earning less on it, so it'd be actually creating a new obligation that otherwise would not have existed.
Now, will this contingency fund help address that risk?
The contingency fund will help address the risk of year over year. So if to give you an example, if in year one you earned 7.3%, as expected, in year two you earned 10%, in year three you earned 2%, which is below expectation, it would help you manage that year three.
Okay.
Or to put it more bluntly, if you were to have a 2008 type of event occur, which, hopefully we wouldn't see that again, but none of us really quite know that, it would help you manage how much the increase in payments that could occur from that type of event. And we actually do a lot of modeling to help. Right. You don't want to make that reserve too large because it's expensive, you're borrowing for it. You don't want to make it too small because if it's too small, it's ineffective. And so there's a delicate balance that we'd work with your team on to help sort of find the sweet spot that aligns to your policy objectives should you move forward.
Okay, thank you. And that amount was 40?
4.3 million is the
Oh.
sort of estimated amount that we would use as a starting point. I think we'd refine that with some
Okay.
additional analysis. But I think that's a reasonable estimate for something, considering the risks that we'd want to manage against. Particularly, there's a couple of tools. For market risk, we usually model everything against worst case. So we model against 2008 with the idea of having 3 years in your pocket. And the idea is if you have 3 years of increased payments in your pocket, or in the fund, I think of it in the pocket. But if you're to have that, there's two things that could happen. One, hopefully, which actually did occur after 2008, you see some reversion to the mean. Two, you might find, if that didn't occur, if there was some secular shift in the world, which is, of course, very unfortunate, you'd have time to adjust your expenses and revenues to manage that new expense.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments on risks? Just because I know it's a very important topic, I want to provide really any thoughts you might have.
So over sorry, Mayor, may I?
Please go ahead.
So over the next 16 years, if everything goes as this chart goes, we're going to save $20 million over 16 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if PRS were to earn more than 7.3 on average, it'd be more, and if it were less, you might be ahead by, 15 million or 18 million, or, it's obviously going to depend on the exact returns.
Now,
But-
this addresses our unfunded liability. We still have our annual payments to maintain.
Yes.
So this is in addition to our annual PSPRS payments.
That would be in addition to your normal cost payments associated. Now, granted, tiers 1 and 2 are currently closed, but your tier 3 employees, those payments would continue independent of this.
Right.
In the
But
same way.
this would still save us that much money because that debt is real and
Yes.
unavoidable. And this would stabilize the funding mechanism every year, so we're not scratching about how to pay for it.
Yes, that's right. It would stabilize both the growth as well as the volatility in the sort of off years that may occur due to actuarial or investment return risks.
Thank you.
Mayor, and
Yes, please
we're
go ahead.
obligated to have this current or caught up by what year?
2035,
2038.
2038, it's correct.
Okay.
2038? Okay.
Unless PSPRS board were to take some other board action, but I don't, in speaking with their leadership, I'm not aware of anything coming down the pipe.
Oh, okay, and this takes us through 2038. So we'll pay it off. But if the returns were a lot greater, this could be paid off sooner.
Yes,
Maybe.
we typically recommend using callable debt. So yes, you could pay off some of those
With
longer
no
bonds,
penalty.
assuming you were to have a call feature. If for some reason we went to market with non-callable, which I personally don't recommend, callable debt, meaning that you could pay off it after 10 years rather than having to wait the full term, is what I would recommend. It's what we've built into these numbers.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we've actually talked about the page 12, contingency reserve fund. But if you need good bedtime material, it is there. It is actually a very technical matter. The modeling for it is probably much harder than actually modeling the bonds. I find this is the hardest thing. Really, again, the art of making it neither too big nor too small, because of course you are borrowing for this money. So you don't want to borrow. Our goal is for you not to borrow $1 more than you need to.
Thank you.
So we have that, and I think that there's some other data here that talks about your, pledged revenues, which is what we would be structuring against. And I'll just turn here to page 14, which shows the 9.44 coverage. And why this is important, obviously, is the ability to repay the bonds from these revenues is very, nearly 10 times. That's important because when we go talk to investors nationally, they're going to look at Kingman and learn about the story and look at this coverage and get to those lower rates that we were talking about relative to credit spreads and that. And I would share, typically, I like to do an investor presentation with your leadership from Kingman, by which we share that with investors nationally, sometimes even internationally, although most of this typically would go to U.S. investors. And, people like to learn about Kingman, tell me about it, where is it? If you're sitting at a desk in, Boston, you may not be familiar with it. So we always like to do that. Frankly, it gets back to our view that every basis point matters. We haven't, we've done a lot of these in Arizona because we're really very serious about getting the best execution. And it's, a privilege to talk to you. We do have a calendar that I could turn it back over to Mark if we wanted to talk a little bit about what that would be if you were to move forward. But I really wanted to thank you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and members of the council for the opportunity to visit and to get to visit Kingman in person. It's such a nice thing.
We really appreciate you being here in person. Thank you so much for making the trip.
Thank you very much.
This is an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Nice job, Omar. And I wanted to thank Omar myself, too. I guess in terms of if you were interested in moving forward, and obviously you don't need to make that decision tonight, it would take us about 90 days if you wanted to move, expeditiously. It's about a 90-day process to get it through, council and come back to you for approval and work on the credit ratings. And in the meantime, I know we've talked to Ms. Moline about making sure that you budget for, because under the Arizona budget law, we need to budget for a potential issuance of pension bonds. So these numbers in here are pretty firm all in all. And then we could put together a calendar and get this thing kicked off and move expeditiously if we think, or if you think these rates are going to start rising up on us, it would probably behoove us to go sooner rather than later. So we'll just wait to hear back from staff in terms of your direction, but just wanted to give you that kind of general overview on the schedule, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And this is a department report, so we can't take an action on it tonight. But certainly based on the comments that I'm hearing, I think we're all very happy to move forward with this.
Okay.
Our plan is to move forward. We wanted to provide this education to make sure that questions got asked and answered. But our intention is to bring this back and move through that 90-day process. So you will see it shortly.
Excellent. I think expediting is called for in this situation because these interest rates are great, but as you say, they could be rising.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. Good questions. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
It's a pleasure. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, announcements by mayor, council member, city manager, limited to announcements, board and commission liaison reports, availability, attendance at conferences and seminars. Manager Foggin.
Thank you, Mayor. The announcement that I have is really to let you know that you're going to be receiving an email from me requesting that you contact our local state legislators. I want to make you aware of there is a legislative budget proposal in front of our state legislators right now. The governor's budget is proposing a $1.5 billion income tax cut. And doesn't that sound wonderful? I will suggest that it is not wonderful. And I just wanted, this is a sheet that was sent out today by the league that is very, very concerning. And I just wanted to share with you that the local income tax is going to be affected. It's known as the urban revenue sharing. in which 15% of the state income tax collected, about $828 million for fiscal year 2021, are distributed amongst all the cities and towns. The consequence of the $1.5 billion reduction will cost local or municipalities $225 million annually. When you take into consideration that approximately 70% of our general fund, and this is general fund money, 70% of general fund money is made up of public safety, the state legislature is basically defunding public safety with this effort. The cost to Kingman is estimated to be, in the next year, if this is implemented, is expected to be $1.2 million out of our general fund. So this is really detrimental, and that's my announcement, and it is to let you know that I will be providing our state legislators' contact information along with some questions that we've been asked to answer and provide, and all that data will be provided to you so that you can either add to that or just forward it to state legislators, and it's certainly not limited to only our legislators, but if you know anybody else. Obviously, as a percentage, it may not sound like a lot when you look at Phoenix at $63 million, but compared to our budget versus their budget, ours is actually ends up being a higher percentage of revenue. So it will be detrimental, especially to rural Arizona cities. And that's all I have for you tonight.
I don't even want to say thank you. Don't boo. Thank you, Manager Foggin. Counselor Samalai.
I did want to say that I attended the uncoupling of the fire station along with other members of council, and I was very impressed. Fire Station 22. I was very impressed. I went on the tour, got to see the training facilities. So I think it is a great addition to our community, and the training that goes on there is just amazing. And so we're very grateful to have that in our community. And so I want to thank Chief Rhodes and staff and council that voted to move forward with that project, because it's definitely needed, and I know it will be used. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Walker.
I just have one thing. I'd like to, I think I were in the right spot here, maybe at a future meeting, look at our street maintenance and preservation means and methods and where we're at. I know when we lost the sales tax, that took a lot of that money out. You know, we got a prime rib appetite, but we're on a ground beef budget, so we need to look at our future, what we're going to do with our streets, because we got to live within our means, and just in the next few
Councilman,
months.
okay, and we're skipping around here a little, but that's fine. That's actually a request for a future report or update.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was at the wrong.
That's okay. So I'm sure Manager Foggin has noted that, and I'm sure that's part of our budget discussions anyway. But we can have part of that in council. And I just can't tell you how much I want to see Jack Plante's presentation for the 10th time. Seriously. Oh, well, but we can discuss that in a future meeting. And quite frankly, thank you, because it's a very relevant topic for this council, and we are going to have to make some serious decisions. Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, Dr. Swab did bring up an important thing. You know, it's tough sometimes serving on the commissions, and continually I do want to thank all those who do serve on the commissions. Most of the time the council does agree with them. Sometimes there is a conflict, and that does happen. But I do appreciate all the work that is done by our commissions and the people that serve on them. That's
Thank
it.
you. Councilwoman Nelson, you still there?
I'm still here. I have nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Did I get everyone? Just a few things. I want to thank Manager Foggin and the staff for putting on a nice retirement for Mr. Greg Henry, our engineering director. It was just very well received. So many attended, and we're sorry to see him go. But the cakes were delicious, and I think and the plaque was very nice. So we wish him well in retirement. I agree about the fire station. That was a wonderful tour. Thank Chief Rhodes, also Chief Cooper. There were a lot of the KPD there, and just a lot of community members that attended. And just an excellent job in retrofitting the facility and in the new training tower. And also we had some very nice people attend, dignitaries, Supervisor Gene Bishop, and Coral Evans from Senator Kelly's office was there. Just a lot of people appreciate our fire service and our protective services, so thank you. And finally, just a reminder again about Tri-City Council. I've had several meetings. We've been working on the agenda. I think we have a really good agenda for April 21st, I think it is. April 21st at 11 o'clock in Lake Havasu or by Zoom. So you can attend it either way. And I think we're going to have some really nice presentations there that will be meaningful for all of us. That's all I have. So are there any other council requests for future reports and updates? Then this meeting is adjourned.